John had always trusted his wife Emma with all his heart. They had been married for over 5 years, building a life together. Their home was filled with laughter, shared moments, and a love that seemed unbreakable. But everything changed one quiet evening when John returned home earlier than usual. As he entered their living room, he overheard muffled voices coming from their bedroom. At first, he thought it might be the TV or maybe even a late-night call. But as he stepped closer, he realized with a sinking feeling that it was something else entirely. His wife, Emma, was speaking in a hushed tone to someone he didn't recognize. The man's voice sounded too familiar to be just a friend, and it sent chills down his spine. John quietly opened the door just a crack. His eyes widened in shock as he saw Emma sitting on the bed, her body pressed against a man he'd never seen before. They were laughing together, and the intimacy between them was undeniable. His world collapsed in that moment, as the realization hit him like a ton of bricks. His wife was cheating on him. Heart racing, John turned and walked out of the house, his mind a whirlwind of disbelief and betrayal. He needed space, air, anything to calm the storm brewing inside of him. He spent hours walking aimlessly, his thoughts consumed by the images of his wife with another man. When he finally returned home, it was quiet, too quiet. Emma was gone. Her belongings were missing, and there was a single note left on the kitchen counter. The letter was brief, but it pierced his heart. She wrote that she couldn't live a lie anymore, and that she needed to be free. She apologized for the hurt she caused, but made it clear that she had made her choice. Without another word, she disappeared, leaving John with nothing but an empty house and the shattered remnants of their once perfect life. Days turned into weeks, and John tried to piece together the fragments of what had happened. He reached out to her, leaving messages, but there was no reply. It was as if Emma had erased herself from his life completely. The phone calls went unanswered, the texts unread, and eventually he gave up trying to find her. In the end, it wasn't just a betrayal that cut the deepest. It was a silence that followed, the complete disappearance of the woman he once loved. Emma was gone, and with her went any chance of healing the wounds she had left behind. As the days stretched into months, John tried to return to some semblance of normality. He focused on his work, threw himself into hobbies he had neglected, and surrounded himself with friends who tried to lift his spirits. But the hole Emma had left in his life was vast, and no matter how much he tried to fill it, he couldn't escape the weight of the betrayal. He often found himself reflecting on their time together, wondering where things had gone wrong. He replayed every conversation, every argument, every smile, looking for signs he had missed. But nothing added up. Emma had always seemed so happy, so invested in their life. The suddenness of her departure still stung, and the uncertainty of why she had chosen to disappear without any explanation ate away at him. One evening, John decided to check their old social media accounts. It had been months since he last checked, but something urged him to look. Maybe there was something, anything, that could shed light on where she had gone or why she had left. His hands trembled as he scrolled through the photos of their happy moments, their vacations, the laughter shared in private moments. He then noticed something odd. Emma had posted a picture of herself with another man, someone he didn't recognize. The caption was simple: "New beginnings." The realization hit him like a physical blow. Not only had she been unfaithful, but she had moved on. John sat there, staring at the screen, his heart heavy with the knowledge that Emma had already built a new life without him, one that didn't involve him at all. For a while, he let the grief consume him. The loneliness crept in at night, and the thoughts of their broken relationship followed him everywhere. But as time went on, he found a strange sense of clarity. He realized that Emma's departure wasn't just about the affair or the betrayal. It was about something deeper, something he couldn't control or fix. She had made her choice, and no matter how much he longed for answers, he had to accept that some things weren't meant to be understood. Slowly, John began to heal. The scars of the betrayal remained, but they became a part of him, not defining him, but teaching him to rebuild. He learned to forgive, not for Emma's sake, but for his own peace of mind. He had to let go, not just of her, but of the version of himself that had existed in that life they had shared. Months turned into years, and while the memory of Emma would always be there, John found new meaning in his life. He opened his heart again to new friendships, new experiences, and, eventually, love. But he never forgot the lesson that betrayal had taught him, that sometimes the people you love can disappear in an instant, and all you can do is choose to move forward. Emma was gone, and with her, the life they had built. But John, with time, learned that his life was far from over. He would be okay. As the years passed, John found a way to build a life that, while never quite the same, was still full of its own moments of joy and fulfillment. He had grown stronger in the aftermath of Emma's departure, no longer defined by the painful chapter of betrayal and loss. Instead, he focused on becoming a better version of himself, one who could look back without bitterness and appreciate the lessons the experience had taught him. He started traveling more, visiting places he had once dreamed of but never had the chance to explore with Emma. He met new people along the way, each encounter offering a different perspective on life and love. Slowly, John realized that there was so much more to life than the woman who had walked away from him. The world was vast, and there was still so much to discover. Yet, despite all the healing, there were moments when memories of Emma would resurface. He would catch himself wondering if she ever thought about him, if she ever regretted how things had ended. But those moments became fewer and farther apart as time went on. He began to understand that those thoughts were just remnants of a past that no longer had a hold on him. Then, one evening, as John sat in a quiet cafe, sipping his coffee, he saw her. Emma. She walked in, her eyes scanning the room, and for a moment, time seemed to slow. She hadn't changed much. Still the same warm smile, the same presence that had once made his heart race. But now, there was something different about her, something more distant. She looked like a stranger, someone from a past life that he no longer recognized. Their eyes met for a brief second, and for a moment, everything seemed to come rushing back. The good times, the heartbreak, the anger, the sadness. But John didn't feel the overwhelming rush of emotions he once would have. Instead, there was a quiet calm within him. He stood up slowly, made his way to the door, and walked past her without a word. As he left the cafe, he didn't feel the sting of betrayal that once dominated his thoughts. He didn't feel anger or sadness, just a profound sense of peace. Emma had moved on long ago, and so had he. She was no longer a part of his life, and that was okay. He had come to terms with it all. John continued his journey forward, embracing the future without looking back. He had learned the hard way that sometimes people leave, and sometimes they disappear entirely. But that didn't mean you had to disappear with them. Life kept moving, and John was determined to keep up with it. Years passed, and John's life unfolded in unexpected yet fulfilling ways. He found new passions, reconnected with old friends, and even built a career that brought him a sense of purpose he had once lost. He became a version of himself that was rooted in strength and self-respect, no longer haunted by the shadows of his past. Emma, though a memory that would occasionally float into his thoughts, no longer had the power to dictate his happiness or his sense of self. Then, one autumn evening, after a long day, John found himself sitting on a bench at a park, watching the leaves fall in quiet succession. It was a peaceful, almost poetic moment. As he sat there, lost in the rhythm of nature, he noticed a woman approaching. Her steps were measured, almost hesitant, and her gaze met his as she drew closer. There was something familiar in the way she carried herself, and it took only a moment for John to recognize her. It was Emma. She was standing in front of him now, her presence unexpected, yet somehow not out of place in the serene silence of the park. Emma hesitated, as if searching for the right words, before finally speaking. "John, it's been a long time," she said softly, her voice carrying the weight of years. For a moment, John simply looked at her. Time had changed them both, in ways that were obvious and in ways that were harder to discern. Emma seemed different, older, perhaps, but not in a way that diminished her. Her eyes held a mixture of regret and sorrow, but also something else. She looked vulnerable, the kind of vulnerability that only time and experience can bring. "I didn't expect to see you," John replied, his voice steady but not cold. "I didn't think you'd ever come back." "I didn't know how to," Emma said, her voice breaking slightly. "I left because I had to, because I wasn't the person I needed to be. But it never felt right, leaving you like that. Not without any answers. Not without closure." "I'm sorry." John nodded slowly, his heart not racing but steady calm. He had heard the apology before, in countless imagined conversations over the years, but now it felt real, and yet it wasn't the apology that mattered anymore. It was the moment, the fact that she had come to him, seeking peace, seeking to explain the past. "I've forgiven you, Emma," John said quietly. "I've had a long time to come to terms with everything. It hurt, more than you can probably understand, but it doesn't hurt anymore. I've let go." Emma's eyes filled with tears at his words, a look of relief and sorrow intertwined. "I never wanted to hurt you. I was lost, and I didn't know how to find my way back to you, to us." John smiled gently, a smile that held no bitterness. "We can't go back, Emma. We can't fix what's broken, but we can both move forward." They sat in silence for a while, not needing to say anything more. The weight of their shared past had been acknowledged, and in that moment, it felt like enough. The air between them was no longer charged with anger or regret. It was simply two people who had been a part of each other's lives, now existing apart but with a shared understanding of what they had both been through. When they eventually stood to part ways, there was no lingering goodbye, no promises of future contact. Instead, there was a quiet acceptance that what they had shared was over. Emma had her own path to follow, and John had his. But they both understood now that their past was a chapter that had closed, and with it, so had the pain. John watched her walk away, her figure disappearing down the path, and he felt a sense of closure that he hadn't realized he was still seeking. The past had its place, but it no longer defined him. He had become someone stronger, someone who had learned that love, loss, and forgiveness were all part of the human experience. And with each step forward, he was reminded that the future was still waiting for him, full of new possibilities and the promise of a life that was finally his to live on his own terms. As the sun dipped below the horizon,